The wind came down from the northern hills like a whispering ghost, stirring the dust and carrying old warnings with it. Cross Hollow, a hard-bitten speck of a town wedged between rust-colored canyons and parched trails, had learned to listen when the wind spoke. It creaked porch boards, rattled shutters, and reminded folk of things best left forgotten, like warpaths, lost riders, and the blood debts that never truly faded. Silas Grady leaned against his fence post as the sunset bled into the horizon, staining the sky with bruised reds and golds. His hat sat low over his weathered face, shadowing eyes that had once scanned enemy lines and now watched only the slow rise and fall of his chestnut mare's flank. The horse, one of three he kept on his quiet spread, nickered softly. He didn't answer. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was to the animals or the wind. Behind him, the tiny ranch house he built with his own hands stood crooked but sturdy. There were no visitors, no family, no laughter, just the smell of dry wood, old coffee, and leather. He'd been this way since the war ended and his wife was buried on the far hill, next to a stone that bore her name, but not the son she carried. Silas. The voice startled him. Few dared call him by name. He turned to see Sheriff Tom Avery, his coat dusty, his holster worn, and his brow furrowed with something heavier than the sun. "Evenin'," Silas said. "Could use a word," the sheriff replied, glancing over his shoulder like the shadows might hear. They walked along the fence line in silence, boots crunching gravel. Finally, Avery spoke. "There's word from the old trail. Ranch hand from Barnett's saw movement near the canyon creek. Small figure, limping, brown-skinned, young." Silas didn't blink. "Comanche, that's what folks think." "You believe it?" Avery shrugged. "Don't know what to believe anymore. But they're nervous. You know how quick they get. Don't want a repeat of Hollow Pass." At the name, Silas turned his head slightly. Avery noticed. "They're saying leave it. Let nature run its course." "And you?" "I'm just the man who has to clean up when things go sideways." He paused. "But I thought you ought to know. You've got land out that way." Silas gave a slow nod and walked back toward his porch without another word. The sheriff didn't press him. The sun had long vanished by the time Silas lit the single lamp inside his cabin. He sat at the worn table, running his fingers over a rough scar on his forearm. There were memories there of fire, arrows, and cries in the night, of decisions made in the blur of blood and regret. He didn't reach for the rifle hanging above the hearth. Not yet. Outside, the wind picked up. The horses shifted in their pens, uneasy. Silas stood alert. He moved to the door and opened it quietly. A rustle. He stepped off the porch, boots silent against the dry earth. Another rustle, this time near the corral. He moved like a shadow, hugging the barn's edge, eyes scanning for movement. Then he saw her. A small figure, barely more than a girl, slumped against the far fence post. Long, tangled black hair hung over her face. Her dress, or what remained of it, was stained with dirt and blood. Her breathing came in short, shallow bursts. Silas approached slowly. She didn't flinch. When he knelt beside her, she raised her head just enough to reveal eyes like polished stone. Eyes that didn't plead, only watched. Her lips moved, cracked and dry. She whispered something, barely audible over the wind. He leaned closer. Grady. The name struck him like a bullet. He hadn't heard it spoken that way in decades, with a knowing weight, not just recognition. He stared at her. "Who are you?" But she was already slipping into unconsciousness, her body slumping sideways. He looked out at the open night. No riders, no lights. Still, he scooped her up in his arms and carried her toward the house. Inside, he laid her gently on the cot near the stove. He fetched water, bandages, and the bottle of whiskey he saved for dying men. Her ankle was swollen, possibly broken, and a gash along her ribs oozed red. He cleaned the wound with the care of a man used to patching torn flesh. Her skin was warm, fevered. As he worked, she stirred. Her fingers gripped his sleeve. "You saved him," she whispered. "Who?" But she fell into restless sleep, muttering in a language he hadn't heard since he wore Union blue and rode scout west of the Brazos. Silas stood and poured a shot of whiskey, drinking it slow. The wind howled louder now, pushing against the windows, rattling the old glass. He looked toward the door. Somewhere out there, someone was hunting this girl, and they knew she was alive. He moved to the hearth and took down the rifle. His fingers found the oil-stained grooves as easily as they once had the grip of a cavalry saber. He opened the box beneath the floorboards and pulled out what was left of his past: 6 cartridges, a bone-handled knife, and a folded cloth map with notches he could still read blindfolded. Then he stepped outside. From the ridge above the barn, flickers of light danced, distant, slow-moving. Not stars. Torches. Someone was coming. He went back inside, bolted the door, and sat beside the girl, the rifle resting across his lap. Her breathing was steadier now. "I don't know who you are," he murmured, watching the door, "but I reckon we'll find out before morning." Outside, the wind moaned, dragging the scent of smoke through the canyons. The past, it seemed, had found him again. By morning, the wind had quieted, but the air was still uneasy, like the land itself held its breath. The girl slept through the dawn. Silas kept watch, stepping out only once to check the ridge. The torches from the night before were gone, but fresh tracks scarred the soft earth. Wide-hooved, heavy riders, too many for comfort. They hadn't come close, but they'd circled, scouting, testing the wind. Back inside, she stirred. Silas watched her from the corner, cup in hand. He'd boiled coffee, though he hadn't tasted it in years. She winced when she moved, eyes fluttering open, alert in an instant. He offered water. She took it, but slowly, mistrusting. "You're safe here," he said. "For now." She wiped her mouth and stared at the fire. "Grady," she said again, voice hoarse. "You knew my father." Silas lowered himself to the chair across from her. "I've known a lot of men. Some I'd rather forget." "He remembered you," she said. "Even when he lost his sight. He said a man with ash in his voice and fire in his eyes spared him when others didn't." Silas didn't speak. He didn't need to. The memory had waited patiently for years, and now it stepped forward without shame. Smoke and thunder at Hollow Pass, the chaos, the orders to kill everything that moved. He'd found a wounded Comanche man crawling through the sagebrush, blood on his hands, but no weapon. The man had looked him in the eye, nodded once, and turned his face to the sun, waiting for the shot. Silas had lowered his rifle. "He called you Gray Fire," she continued, studying him. "Said you walked with death but never lost your shadow." Silas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "And your name?" "Nita. How long you been running?" 3 days. They came at night. White men, wearing army coats, but riding like thieves. My uncle tried to fight. My cousins died before they could stand. They want no witnesses." Silas stood, walked to the hearth. He lifted a rusted tin from the mantel and shook out a silver key. From beneath the floorboards, he opened the old cedar chest and removed a small bundle. Inside was a folded photograph, a carved tobacco pipe, and a military-issued Sharps rifle wrapped in oiled cloth. Nita watched without speaking. "They weren't soldiers," he said, checking the rifle's action. "Not anymore. But I know the kind. Deserters. Men who traded flags for greed." He paused, running a thumb over the initials carved into the rifle stock. "They follow a man named Vane," she said quietly. "Malcolm Vane." Silas looked up. The name landed heavy. "You know him." "I served under him once," he said, "till he left a squad to die for his promotion. Thought he got hanged in Missouri." "He's not dead." "Not yet," Silas muttered. He moved to the cabinet, poured a ladle of broth into a tin cup, and handed it to her. "Eat. You'll need strength." She drank without thanks. Not out of rudeness, just survival. Gratitude was a luxury they both understood too well. Later that afternoon, Silas led her outside. She limped but refused his help. In the yard, he whistled once, sharp and low. From the back paddock, a broad-shouldered Mustang trotted up, nostrils flaring. "This here's Brass," Silas said. "War-trained. Smarter than some men I knew." Nita reached out. The horse didn't shy. "She needs to ride again," Silas told the animal. "You mind her." Brass snorted once, accepting. Over the next few days, they said little. Silas tended her wounds, showed her how to tighten a saddle blind, how to listen to the land, not just see it. She watched him with sharp eyes, never asking about his past, but piecing it together in silence. She saw the way he walked, measured, light, like someone who expected ambush behind every rock. She noticed the burned scars near his wrist, the way he cleaned his rifle with something close to reverence. One evening, as the sun bled behind the mesas, Silas spotted a figure on the far ridge. Just a silhouette. Watching. "They're getting bolder," he said. "They know I'm not dead." Nita replied. "They will soon." That night, someone came to burn him out. He heard it before he saw it. The soft creak of a match, the hiss of flame. The barn lit like a dry book, fire climbing fast. Silas was already moving, pulling Nita out the back, rifle slung over his shoulder. By the time they circled back, the barn was gone. Ash and smoke drifted across the corral. On the fence, carved with a boot knife, were 2 words, "No Redskins." Nita stared at it, fists clenched. "They want you to give me up." Silas didn't answer right away. He looked at the flames, then at her. "I buried my wife under those hills," he said. "She died alone while I was off chasing orders and glory. I missed the birth of my son. He died too." Nita didn't speak. "I've spent the rest of my life pretending the world stopped that day. I didn't think I had anything left to lose." He turned to her. "Turns out I was wrong." She watched him for a long time, the fire pop behind them. "They'll come again," she said. Silas nodded. "Let them." He looked out toward the canyon's edge, where the land twisted into gullies and blind turns. "They don't know this country like I do." "What are you planning?" "I'm tired of hiding from ghosts," he said. "It's time they met one." Nita stepped closer, her voice firm. "Then I ride with you." Silas looked at her, saw the strength there. The pain turned into steel. He nodded once, slow and solemn. "Then we ride together." The canyon yawned open like the throat of some sleeping beast, wide, jagged, and echoing with forgotten names. Silas rode low in the saddle, the morning sun casting gold across the dust. Nita rode just behind him on brass, her figure slight, but steady. They'd left at first light, slipping through narrow gullies and rock-strewn trails only locals or ghosts would dare travel. There were no words between them, just the sound of hooves on gravel and the whisper of the wind curling through stone hollows. Silas had chosen the canyon for a reason. He'd hunted men here once, Confederate deserters, raiders, and one mad preacher who claimed to command angels. The terrain played tricks, turned daylight into dusk, and swallowed the careless. It favored the patient, the quiet, and the angry, all of which he had in spades. They stopped near an outcrop of twisted juniper. Below, a fork in the canyon opened into a basin littered with dry creeks and fallen boulders. "They'll come through there," Silas said, pointing. "It's the only path wide enough for riders and fast enough to escape if they spook." Nita scanned the rocks. "Too open. That's why we set the trap behind it." He led her higher, to a ledge overlooking the basin. There, half covered with brush and broken shale, was a narrow slit in the canyon wall. From it, a man with a rifle could see everything without being seen. They dismounted. Silas knelt by the ledge and unpacked the old map he'd carried since the war. Lines faded, edges torn, but still useful. He traced with his finger. "Vane won't travel light. He'll bring 10 men, maybe more. He thinks in brute force. We don't give him that. We give him a ghost." Nita didn't ask what that meant. She watched him instead, how his hands moved over the rifle, how his eyes tracked the trail below. He wasn't just planning an ambush. He was exorcising something. By midday, they had the perch rigged. Loose rock above the trail, ready to fall. A decoy fire pit near the pass entrance. And under the brush, hidden just deep enough, the line of tripwire attached to a rattlesnake tail and 3 rusted tin cups. Old tricks, but loud ones. "They won't die here," Nita said quietly, brushing sweat from her brow. "Just bleed." "Sometimes a scar does more damage than a bullet," Silas replied. Then they waited. Dust rose near sundown. Silas spotted the riders first, 11 in all, winding down the canyon like a snake hunting warmth. Vane rode near the center, tall in the saddle, hat pulled low, coat flaring behind him like he still thought himself a captain of men. His face, even at distance, was unchanged, sharp, smug, untouched by regret. Silas felt an old heat rise in his gut, but tamped it down. Now wasn't the time for fury. Fury was a young man's weapon. What he carried was colder, more deliberate. The first trap sprung without ceremony. The tripwire snapped, the rattler tail buzzed, and one horse reared, throwing its rider into the creek. Chaos followed. Shouting, gun barrels swinging, riders scattering to the rocks. And just like that, the tight unit was broken. That's when Silas opened fire. His first shot dropped a man who tried to pull the spooked horse into line. The second shattered a canteen on another rider's belt, soaking his powder. Nita, lying prone beside him, let loose a scream that echoed down the walls like a dying spirit. More confusion. They didn't shoot back, didn't know where to aim. Vane dismounted, barking orders. Silas watched him kneel, rifle ready, and that's when he fired again. Not at Vane, but at the rocks near his left. The bullet ricocheted, spitting fragments into Vane's thigh. He howled. Good. Let him bleed. The rest fell into disarray. A few tried to climb the canyon wall. One fled back the way they'd come, only to trigger the loose rocks above. The boulders fell with a crash, burying horse and rider in an instant. By twilight, only 3 remained. The others were either dead, trapped, or vanished into brush. Silas stood, letting them see him. Vane's eyes widened. You! He gasped, leaning against a bloodied boulder. Silas descended the slope slowly, rifle lowered but ready. Grady, Vane spat. I should have known. Always did have a soft spot for savages. Silas didn't reply. Nita followed behind, silent as the dusk. Vane looked at her, recognition crawling over his face. You're the chief's brat, he sneered. The one who slipped through. Nita stepped forward. You killed my cousins. My uncle. They were savages, he said, as if the word excused everything. And now, Silas said softly, you're just another man bleeding in the dirt. Vane tried to raise his rifle. Silas shot him through the wrist. The gun clattered. Vane screamed. You don't get to die quick, Silas said. You ride out of here. You tell every coward wearing an old coat that this canyon is cursed. That gray fire walks it still, and he's not alone. Silas turned away. One of the remaining men dropped his gun without being asked. The other followed. They dragged Vane up, ignoring his curses, his threats. When they disappeared beyond the bend, only silence remained. The stars blinked open. Silas sat on a stone, the rifle across his knees. Nita stood beside him, watching the path until it swallowed all sound. You didn't kill him, she said. Not today. Why? Because legend hurts more than a corpse. She nodded slowly. And what now? Silas looked at her, the firelight flickering in her eyes. Now we go home, he said. There's still a barn to rebuild. The sun crept over the ridge, like it was ashamed of what it had witnessed the night before. In the soft amber light, Silas and Nita returned to the ranch, the horses weary but alive. Smoke still curled from the chimney, a sign that not everything had been taken, and not everything had been lost. The fences stood half broken, the barn scorched but upright. It was, against all odds, still a home. Silas dismounted with a groan, favoring his side where a rock had bruised him during the descent. He glanced at Nita as she slid down from brass. Her face was smudged with dust, her braid undone, but her eyes burned steady. You know, he said, tying his reins to a post, when I left this place years ago, I didn't think I'd be needed again. You were wrong, she said plainly. He chuckled, then winced. Wouldn't be the first time. Together, they walked the perimeter, checking for anything the outlaws might have left behind. A broken spur, a knife wedged in the porch, blood, faint but real, on the front steps. Silas picked up the knife, examined it. One of theirs, he muttered. Left it when they thought they'd already won. Nita stared at it. They'll think twice now. He looked at her, really looked. The fire she'd shown in the canyon hadn't dimmed, it had clarified. No longer fury without a name, but purpose. She wasn't the girl he'd found in the cottonwood grove. She was something else now, something the land would remember. By midday, they'd cleared the wreckage of the corral and patched the barn's door. Nita worked like she'd been born to it. Silas handled the hammer and timber with a craftsman's precision, lost in the rhythm. For a time, there was no past or vengeance or blood, just work, sweat, and silence. But word spreads fast in places like this. By the third day, a rider came from the south, one of the cattlemen who had always kept his distance from the old Grady place. He didn't dismount, just tipped his hat and said, "Heard tell you sent Vane running like a kicked dog." Silas said nothing. The rider grinned. "Folks in Dry Butte say Greyfire walks again. Say he walks with a Comanche shadow who don't blink." Silas didn't smile. "You believe that?" "I believe men like Vane only understand pain. And someone gave it to him." He rode off without waiting for thanks. Others came, days later, small folk with small farms, offering help in their awkward ways. Boards, rope, seeds, not charity, tribute. Silas never asked for any of it. He never refused it either. One evening, Nita sat by the creek, her toes in the water, eyes on the horizon. Silas joined her, a tin cup of coffee in hand. The wind stirred the cottonwoods, whispering old names. "You leave again," she said softly. "I might." She didn't look at him. The land remembers who defends it. It won't let you rest easy anywhere else. He nodded slowly. It never did before. Silas thought of the war, of the raids, of the years spent drifting from town to town like a man with no anchor. He'd once believed peace was the absence of battle. Now he understood. It was choosing where to make your stand, and who you stood for. "You ever think about them?" Nita asked. "The ones you couldn't save?" "All the time." She turned to him. "Then make this count. Stay. Build." It wasn't an order. It was a vow wrapped in hope. That night, Silas walked the boundary of the ranch alone, rifle slung but unneeded. The stars watched, the way they always had, cold, distant, but patient. Somewhere an owl called. Somewhere far off, a wolf answered. He stopped near the ridge, where the wind bent the grass low. Once, this had been just land, dirt and bone and memory. Now it was more. It was defended. Come spring, the barn stood taller. The fields held green. And in the town of Dry Butte, children played a new game. They rode sticks like horses and wore makeshift dusters, yelling stories about the gray-eyed man who shot without missing and the girl who never cried. They spoke of a canyon where outlaws vanished and a ranch that refused to die. And every traveler who passed through town heard it. Everyone warned him not to help a Comanche. They'd whisper. But when she spoke his name, he couldn't walk away. Most didn't believe it, but those who'd seen the man, standing quiet in the general store, or riding the edge of dusk with a rifle on his back, they didn't ask questions. They just tipped their hats. Because legends don't ask for permission. They just stay.